Here's a fact NASA didn't want you to know until 3 months ago. The man who ran Mission Control's launch operations for Apollo 11, the man whose team gave the final clearance to fly, spent World War II in an SS uniform and once turned in a coworker to the Gestapo for refusing to salute him. His name was on a NASA building until 2025. Not a footnote, not a rumor historians argue about at conferences. A working conference room at Kennedy Space Center with his name on the door for 80 years until someone finally decided that was no longer worth defending. Hold two numbers while I tell you this story. 20,000, 80. The first is how many people died building the machine that eventually carried Americans to the moon. The second is how many years it took the people responsible to admit it. You'll want both by the end, and neither is going to mean what you think it means right now. Underneath both numbers is one man whose story is stranger and more damning than either the building rename or a Disney celebrity's untouched legacy. His name was Arthur Rudolph. He ran the factory floor where those 20,000 people died. He then ran NASA's Saturn V program for 5 years and received the government's highest civilian honor for it. He ended his life stateless, deported, detained in an airport by a country that wasn't even the one that erased him in the first place. This is what an institution will protect, and this is what it costs the people it decides not to. Germany, August 1945. Rubble and 2 armies racing across it, not for land, for people. The engineers behind the V-2, the world's first long-range ballistic missile. Whoever gets them first doesn't just end a war that's already over, they win the next one before it starts. The Soviets are moving just as fast and just as ruthlessly. Entire teams of Peenemünde engineers marched east instead of west, willingly or not, to build the same rockets under a different flag. This is the real shape of the space race's origin. Not 2 nations racing to inspire the world, 2 nations racing to inherit the same weapons program before the other could finish the paperwork. Everything that follows, the moon, the medals, the myth of American ingenuity, begins as a custody fight over war criminals. Truman signs off on the American side with exactly one condition in writing. No active Nazi militarists get into the country. Not a guideline, an order with his signature on it. Nearly every senior engineer who built Hitler's rockets fits that description. Wernher von Braun is the face of it. Brilliant, telegenic, already a minor celebrity to the officers who capture him. His file doesn't flatter him. SS officer, party member since 1937, joined the SS itself in 1940 at Himmler's personal invitation. Security threat to the United States. In writing, no hedging. Behind him, doing the production math nobody wants to look at, is Arthur Rudolph, operations director at Mittelwerk, an underground factory built into a mountain where the V-2 is mass-produced by prisoners shipped in from Buchenwald and later from a camp built specifically to staff the tunnels, Mittelbau-Dora. Rudolph sets the quotas. He has standing authority to requisition forced labor when output slips, and by his own later admission, he used it. Prisoners are starved, beaten, hung in the tunnels for sabotage, real or suspected, while the men beside them are made to keep working underneath the bodies, so they understand what refusal costs. Historians put the number at roughly 20,000 dead. Say it again slower. 20,000 people. More than the finished weapon ever killed in combat. The rocket that reaches the moon kills more people being built than it ever kills being fired. Both men should have been barred from American soil. Their files said so, plainly. Nobody at the top disputed the facts. They disputed what to do about facts that had become inconvenient. So they rewrote the files. The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, quietly produced cleaner versions of the same dossiers. SS memberships softened. War crimes folded into language mild enough that no reviewer would flinch. When a State Department official read the unedited originals and called these men exactly what they were, ardent Nazis, the JIOA's director wrote back furious in a memo that survives to this day, accusing his own government of beating a dead Nazi horse. Sending them back to Germany, he argued, was the greater risk. He won, not with evidence, with volume. repeating that the mission mattered more than the truth until the truth got filed away instead of the men. Von Braun and Rudolph sail for America within months. Remember them both. A third name is about to join them, and by the end, his story will say more about how this actually works than either of theirs. 2 years later, America gets its first real chance to stop protecting Rudolph. It does the opposite. Dachau, August 1947. 19 former Mittelbau-Dora personnel stand trial for war crimes committed in the exact tunnels Rudolph ran. 70 survivors testify. The starvation, the beatings, hangings staged inside the factory floor so the workforce would watch and learn. 15 convictions, 1 death sentence, carried out that December. Rudolph's name isn't on the docket. He's already in America, already too valuable to extradite. Von Braun is asked to testify. His own employer, the U.S. Army, blocks him from traveling to Germany to do it. When the trial ends, the Army classifies the entire case record specifically to keep Mittelwerk out of public view. This isn't a clerk quietly editing a file in 1945. This is the United States government intervening in a live war crimes trial in 1947 to protect 2 men it had decided it needed more than it needed to answer for them. The cover-up isn't one decision. It's a policy, renewed, on purpose, for the next 38 years. Von Braun becomes America's favorite German. Disney specials, magazine covers. The friendly voice of the future, explaining rockets to children who have no idea the man on their screen once held the rank of SS Sturmbannführer. Rudolph works in his shadow. Fort Bliss, then Huntsville. A top Army honor in 1960. Nobody asks what came before it. NASA in 1961. By 1963, project director of the Saturn V. Not an advisor, the man actually running it for 5 years on his signature. He isn't the only one in that control room with something buried. Kurt Debus, another Peenemünde veteran, becomes the first director of what's now Kennedy Space Center. His file doesn't flatter him either. Colleagues later say he wore his SS uniform to work. And there's this. During the war, he personally reported a fellow engineer to the Gestapo for refusing to salute him. That colleague did 2 years of hard labor because of it. Debus is never investigated. He goes on to direct 150 launches, including 13 Saturn V's. And it's his team, in his control room, that clears Apollo 11 to fly. NASA puts his name on a building. It stays there for over 4 decades after he's gone. It comes down quietly, without a statement, in 2025. But none of that reaches Rudolph in time. Unlike Debus, he doesn't get to die quietly with his name still on the wall. This should have been the end of his story, buried under a moon landing and a government with every reason never to reopen its own paperwork. Files fade, witnesses die. Nobody was supposed to still be asking in 1979. Somebody was. That year, the Justice Department opens the Office of Special Investigations, built to find war criminals living quiet American lives. They pull the paperclip thread almost immediately, and they want what the file said before anyone touched it. The original reports had been sitting in an archive for over 3 decades, available the entire time, simply never requested by anyone with the will to pull them. Here's what nobody saw coming, including Rudolph. The file that finally catches him isn't new. It's the same file from 1945. It was there the whole time, through the trial he skipped, through the medal, through Apollo 11. Waiting. Fall 1982. 76 years old. Recovering from a heart attack, Rudolph sits for the first of 2 interrogations. Could he requisition forced laborers when production fell behind? Yes. Did he? Yes, I did. On the record. In transcripts the Justice Department never releases publicly, describing conduct that, according to the World Jewish Congress, meets the legal definition of crimes against humanity under Nuremberg. Not alleged, admitted by him. He's out of moves. Every colleague who might vouch for him is dead. A trial will drag on for years and end in conviction regardless. So in November 1983, he signs, leave the country, renounce citizenship, avoid prosecution. Pension intact, family untouched. Nobody has to say Nazi in a courtroom with cameras in it, 36 years after the army made sure he skipped the first one. March 1984, he flies to Germany. That May, at the Hamburg consulate, he gives up the citizenship he's held since 1954, granted without the public ever learning what his own 1945 file actually said. Even Germany doesn't fully want him. Hamburg spends 3 years deciding whether to charge him, the trial he dodged in 1947, circling back a lifetime later. 1987, case closed. Insufficient evidence, though the prosecutor states publicly that Rudolph knew the prisoners were being worked to death. No trial, no conviction. Just 2 governments, 40 years apart, agreeing to let the same door stay shut. That same year, NASA does something it has never done to a Distinguished Service Medal recipient. It takes the medal back. 1989. As NASA marks 20 years since the landing his rocket made possible, Rudolph applies for a visa just to attend as a guest. Denied. The government that once decided his past wasn't disqualifying now decides his presence in a crowd isn't acceptable. Toronto, July, 1990. One last attempt, not to clear his name, just to see his daughter. Detained at the gate. Deported before he crosses the rope line to reach her. He dies in Hamburg, 1996, age 89. A citizen of nowhere, having spent more of his final years chasing a passport than he ever spent in any courtroom answering for the 20,000 people who made his American career possible. Now, hold all 3 names at once. Rudolph von Braun, Debus. Same program, same rewritten files, same 20,000 dead, in the same tunnels. 3 men, 1 machine, 3 different endings, decided by nothing except who was still alive, still American, and still worth exposing the day someone finally looked. Von Braun never answers for any of it. He dies in 1977, 2 years even before OSI exists. Buried a hero, his file never catching up to the version of him the public knew. Debus never answers either. He dies in 1983, the same year Rudolph's interrogation begins. His name still fresh on a NASA building that outlives him by 42 years. Only Rudolph is still breathing when the file finally gets pulled. He doesn't pay because his crimes were worse. The record suggests they weren't. He pays because he happened to still be alive in an era when looking away had finally gotten slightly more expensive than looking. Nothing that happened to him in 1983 required new evidence. The file said everything in 1945 that it said in 1982. The institution didn't fail to know. It knew every time, and chose silence because silence served the mission better than the truth ever would. The silence didn't break because the system corrected itself. It broke because someone outside it, an investigator, a reporter, a records request 80 years later, refused to leave a closed file closed. Most of the men that silence protected never lived to see it open. Arthur Rudolph got a medal in 1969. It was taken back in 1987. Wernher von Braun got a hero's funeral and never answered for a single page of his file. Kurt Debus got a building that outlasted him by 4 decades. And 20,000 people, the number you've been carrying this whole time, got nothing. Not a medal, not a plaque, not one headline the size of what they were owed. History remembers who reached the moon. It's much worse at remembering who was erased so he could. And it's still doing it, quietly, this year, depending entirely on who's still paying attention. Somewhere else in this era, the same silence held for even longer over something even the people protecting it never wanted written down. That one's next.